On this episode of the After the Timeout podcast, in concert with the IBCA, we talk to Coach Grayson, defensive coordinator at Montini High School. We talk to Coach Grayson about managing your game plans, scouting your next opponents, practice planning for that week, and making adjustments to your scout during the game. As always, thank you for listening to the After the Timeout podcast.
All right, Coach, let's get started with our opening tip. We wanted you to kind of just take us through your journey, let our listeners know kind of your path to where you're at. And then kind of the first question is like, how did you know you wanted to be a coach in the beginning? Like when did it click? Like, hey, I might want to do this or, especially on the scale, you're doing it, right? Some people say I'm a coach and dabble a little bit and then, but you're in it for for life. So, when did that kind of click and you kind of started to have that thought in your mind?
It started for me. I was a freshman defensive tackle at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I really was kind of just lost, to be honest with you. I didn't really understand you have to go to class. There was a whole giant new playbook being thrown at me. And even as a nose tackle, I was like, why? It was a joke, but I brought a little QB like play card wristband and put it on my belt so I could learn the plays as a defensive tackle, which is not a lot to learn. But I was just kind of swimming in it, lost. Our defensive coordinator at the time, a guy by the name of Greg Eder, who's the head football coach at Concordia, Wisconsin, up in Mequon, Wisconsin now, really just kind of took an interest in me and got me on the right path. And I said, hey, after this is all done, obviously, being a Division III football player, the aspirations and the dreams of the pros are a little bit limited. I said, hey, when this football thing's done, if I can have that kind of impact on some other kid or multiple, kids, that's kind of what I want to do, because I was about to get thrown out and my grade point average stunk. My mom was ready to kill me. My dad was ready to kill me after my mom was ready to kill me. So he kind of, like I said, got me into tutoring and all that. And, that's kind of what started the coaching, bug for me. And then just, continuing on, I got a job at a local high school right by Carthage, guy by the name of Jed Kennedy. As my buddies say, you're the only guy that takes his first coaching job and you guys go 14-0 and win a state championship. I called the right guy and it was the right time and the right team. And after that, I was hooked. I mean, obviously, having that kind of success, and I was an inside linebackers coach, kind of just right place, right time. And after that, I was hooked. So I've been a bunch of places, but my wife and I, we watch a lot of cooking shows, and, these cooks go to Italy and France and here and there everywhere and train all these, different ways to cook. So I've been in a lot of programs, but I feel like I've taken something from every single program, and it's helped me on my coaching journey. But yeah, without Coach Eder, I wouldn't have graduated. I wouldn't have played. I was a big, strong kid that couldn't figure out when to slant, when not to slant, when to do this, when to do that. And so without a guy like that, I don't know that I would be involved in football at all. So that's kind of what got the bug going. And then, once the coaching bug started, I got hooked up with Jed, and it just took off from there.
I knew we forgot something, Todd, which was go to class. I knew there was a
very important part of the process.
Yes, right.
All right. So you kind of touched on it, but we're going to get into it a little bit deeper. So you've been with multiple programs, and in your career, you have been very fortunate to be a part of many state championship level programs, which is a testament to you and also a little bit of a rarity. So for those coaches out there that maybe have never coached at that high of a level, what are some of the traits you feel go into specifically a state championship program that others just may not notice?
For me, I don't remember which coach I heard this quote from. I think it was Tim Rackey at Nazareth Academy in LaGrange Park. Coaches set the standards, players uphold the culture. So, I've seen programs, been in programs, where it's very coach dominated, and the kids just kind of follow along, and um, eventually the kids kind of have to take that mantle, and it comes from the coaches. The coaches kind of get things rolling, and again, like I said, set the standard. But you got to have a group of kids that are willing to buy in, and really kind of run with it. Some of the best programs I've been at, it's you don't want to say they're led by the players, because obviously there's coaches involved, but they are led by the players. And that's really where I've seen the success. Every great team I've been on, been a part of the program. There's an alpha. There's that guy, and I can go through each team and think of who that guy was. And for me, it's been interesting to see. He kind of sets that. Hey, I'm with the coaches, right? Like I'm doing this with them. So you guys either follow along, or there's going to be an issue, and we're not going to be as successful as we want to be. And so everybody kind of gets in line with that alpha and that guy, and it's then the team really starts taking off.
So we want to talk a little like scheme stuff here with you.
Sure.
And this is always interesting to us, basketball, whatever coach we talk to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Deciding on your scheme, right? Looking at your team each given year, and obviously you have your general concepts, right? You're going to run this and that, but you may be more aggressive here, or different coverage here. So how do you guys go about, especially as a coordinator, kind of deciding on that scheme, and how you're going to tweak your scheme for that year?
I think every program is different. So, I've been a part of programs where, hey, a coach comes in and says, I was at, this program, and we won all these games, so I'm going to do that here. And it doesn't fit, round peg, square hole, or square peg, round hole. And you can see it's like we're not them, like we're not the big school from down the road, or whatever it is. But I think you kind of just take a needs analysis. What are we? How do we get our best players on the field? And in football, it's one guy here, one guy there. You're in a 4-3 or a 3-4 or a 3-3 stack, or my wife still I'm stunned how well she's gotten these all down. But my ramblings of football. But like I would say the best example that I have is in 2015, when I was my first time at Montini. We had a coordinator who's now the head coach, Mike Bukowski, who had won, at that point it was 5 state championships running a 4-3. And we looked at our personnel going into 2015, after running a 4-3 in 2014, and we were runner up in the state. And we kind of looked around and we said, who's our 11th best guy? The first 10 were, every coach agreed on it. And we said, who's our 11th best guy? And it was kind of it was an argument, a discussion, as coaches do, between a safety and another linebacker. And if the safety was the 11th best guy, we stay with the 4-3 and do what we've always done. But it became the consensus that it was another linebacker. And he ended up going to Grand Valley State. Incredible athlete. I mean, just some of the biggest hits I've seen in my career are from one kid by the name of Nick Foster. He's training to be a bodybuilder now. And it's like, I'm eating a breakfast sandwich, looking at his Instagram going, holy cow, I got to go for a run or something. I'm not going to go for the run, but I feel like I should. And Nick was our 11th best guy. And we said, hey, this is the kid that's going to put us over the top. So we changed. I give Coach Bukowski credit. He had done it his way and run the 4-3 and won 5 state championships doing it that way. and we came to the consensus that Nick was our 11th best player, and we switched to a 4-4 cover 3, and as they say, the rest is history. So, just really taking stock of who you have on your roster, and what's the best way to win games and be successful is the way that I've seen that it's done. And again, not trying to be someone else. I think programs get into trouble when a coach gets hired from, big state powerhouse X, and then comes to, Y struggling school and says, well, hey, we did this way at this school, and it worked there. Well, you're not there anymore. So you're at a new program, new school, new kids, new culture. So just really taking account of who you are and what you can do best, I think is the way to be successful with the scheme.
So I'm gonna follow on that a little bit. You gotta just kind of touch on my next question, but everybody has their own comfort level, right? You come
Sure.
from your mentors, right? Or where you started or wherever it may be. And hey, I know this very well. Well, how do you guys, when you were going through that process, kind of get out of your comfort zone, right? And because a lot of times I feel like you fall back into what you know, right?
Sure.
And you guys changing to an extra linebacker instead of a safety might be something that you might not be as familiar with. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you kind of go through that process of one, acquainting with yourself to a new system, and then but being okay with it despite maybe your own biases of what you know and what you've come up with?
Sure. For me, I think one thing that Coach Boo taught me in that moment was to listen to your assistants. Just being open to suggestions. And now that I'm a defensive coordinator, I have a great DBs coach, Cam James. And I remember a game we were coaching. I had this fancy coverage in, and we were going to stop this one player, and he ended up not being the player that we thought he was going to be. And Cam just looks at me at halftime and he goes, "Coach, we can just run our base stuff. You don't have to get so fancy anymore." And I'm like, at first, I'm like, well, I thought of this fancy coverage. I mean, we've got to use it. And then I'm looking around and I'm going, yeah, he's right. We really don't have to use this anymore. I don't know. I don't have to be so just so I think listening to your assistants, having assistants that are, one of the reasons, and again, I've had a lot of hoodies on and a lot of polos, and one of the reasons I wanted to kind of take a look around and go to different programs and be in different places was just to see a different way of how things get done. And I think being able to do that kind of gives you more weapons in your arsenal to be able to attack figuring out a scheme because you've been there and you've seen it. And I think sometimes, I mean, I'm all for being loyal and staying in a program and all that stuff, but I think sometimes, especially as a young coach, go out and see different schemes, go out and see different places, go see how the rival does it, or a completely different team from a completely different conference. Like I said, especially as a young coach, where you're learning and absorbing so much information. I think that's a way to just get to know different schemes and different ways of doing things. And I mean, between my playing career and my coaching career, I think I've been involved or have a playbook from every single kind of defense there is in football, and I can go through I won't waste your time, but, so now I have that kind of that Rolodex in my head where, hey, I've coached when I was in high school, we played a 4-4 cover 3. I'm going to call up, Coach Lafido and Coach Starkey and hey, do you guys have any, tips and tricks and this and that, because we're going to shift to this, defense. And so I guess the other thing would be not being afraid to ask questions of other coaches and other people, and I think once you do that, you can kind of get all that information and see, where you fit in best with what defense. So kind of a long-winded answer to your short question, but yeah, just kind of going and seeing different things so that you are comfortable with more than one, more than one scheme, and then just listening to your assistants if they have, like I said, Coach Bukowski had won 5 state championships running a 4-3 with 2 high safeties, and I was sitting in the meeting like, hey, we should run the 4-4 This is going to be our bet. And it wasn't just me, obviously there were other guys that were involved in the vote, but not being afraid to listen to your assistants, I think, is another big thing.
So building on that now, you and I had kind of had this conversation off the air, but building on that now, you're a coordinator, and anytime in football, especially, you're a coordinator. People start asking you that magic question of, when are you going to be a head coach? Are you looking to be a head coach? So if you have those thoughts in your mind, whether they're passing, whether you want that someday, whether you don't want that someday, what are things you're looking for? And maybe even in the jobs you've had, to know like this is the right fit.
I think someone told me when I was getting recruited, for college, you just kind of know. And I went to every D3 school. I mean, we have 100 of them in this area, and was a really hot Division III recruit. That 4.840 really sets coaches crazy. But I went up to Carthage, and I knew, I was like, this is the place. I love it here. It's not right in the backyard, but it's close enough that I can get home. But I think you just kind of know. You go through an interview, you go through a situation, and what the right fit is for you. And in terms of being a head coach, that was always a goal of mine, to have my own program and put my own spin on things. And, I would say I'd never say never, but I really like kind of just being the head coach of the defense and controlling my own little world. I think head coaches deal with a lot of stuff, and just, being around a lot of head coaches, a lot of great head coaches. I mean, I've worked for a gazillion Hall of Fame guys. It can get stressful, and it's a lot. We were walking out to practice yesterday, and there was a freshman that came in, and nice kid, but he's like, I don't have thigh pads, and I didn't have keys to the equipment room. So it's myself and the varsity head coach are walking out to practice talking about coverage. And the kid's like, I don't have thigh pads. And so now the varsity head coach, it's got to go in the equipment room, get thigh pads for a freshman. And it's like, it's never ending. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's always an email or a phone call or a freshman the nicest boy in the world. He was so respectful. But I'm an off-campus coach, so I don't have keys to everything. And so, he's getting ready for practice. He hands me the practice plans. He's like, hand these out. I got to go get pads for this young man. So, I would say never say never. But I really enjoy kind of just being the head coach of the defense, and maybe not sending out all those emails and dealing with the parent phone calls. And it's a lot, man. I give head coaches a lot of credit. It is a big, big, big job. And it is I think, Coach, you said 350 days a year. You get about 2 weeks to yourself. And I think that might be being generous. So I think, given an opportunity, I think, and with head coaches that I've talked to, asking a lot of questions of the program, who's courting you, am I going to have financial backing, in terms of equipment and jerseys and everybody, kids love cool stuff nowadays. And I feel like our generation, we were just kind of, hey, this is a 10-year-old practice jersey, take it. Okay, cool. Just take what I was given. I'm just happy.
Right. That was like 7 sizes too large or too small, or right. Like,
practice, I played nose, in college, and my practice jersey was number 1. I was just first in line, and it was the top one and it was funny watching my big rear end run around with the number 1 on my practice jersey, but I was just happened to be first in line. Coach, there, that one's yours. Next, that one's yours, but I think having that financial backing and who's hiring you, is it an athletic director that, whatever sport you're, involved in that supports that. Football is kind of a weird animal. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in football. Administration too, asking a lot of questions. I think, and then, just getting that feel, hey, I can be comfortable here, I can do this, we can win here, or we can, change a program around. So that's what I've learned from the guys that have been head coaches, just don't be afraid to ask questions, because again, they're courting you, they're interviewing you, and if it's something that that doesn't work out, then okay, that's fine. I still have a job, and I'll go do my job well. But if you do get that backing and you do have a feeling that, hey, this can work here, then like I said, for me, I would never say never. But I'm really enjoying kind of just being the head coach of the defense, and again, not dealing with thigh pad issues 30 minutes or 30 seconds before practice, excuse me.
So you kind of answered this question here a little bit at the end, but I want to add to it a little bit. So you talked about your mentors and people you've learned along the way. So maybe a couple things, like looking back, you learned early on from people you worked with that resonated with you, and then maybe something you can tell coaches, young coaches trying to get into the game, whether it be basketball, whatever it may be.
Sure.
Because that's kind of hard too, and how to continue to grow the coaching profession and have good people.
I appreciate you guys sending some of the questions early, because I mean, I've learned something from each place I've been at, and again, I've been at quite a few places. So I guess I'll just start from the beginning. Jed Kennedy was the first guy that hired me. He was at Kenosha Bradford High School. He's now at, I think it's Dothan High School in Alabama. And Jed was just the passion. I mean, if you've seen Jed on a sideline, if you know Jed, it's just pure power, man. He is as enthusiastic as you can get. And I really learned that, hey, if you're going to do something, do it with, passion and do it with a love of the game. The next guy went home to my alma mater, Glenbard South. Jeremy Cordell was the head coach there. He's now at Ozark High School in Missouri. He kind of taught me how to coach, like an example I always use is like, he was real big, like, hey, you win a big game, a couple coaches want to go get some beers after the game. Like, hey, we're not going to wear our high school football, whatever, polo and then be slamming beers at the bar, like after the game, like just little things. Like whenever he was at the school, like his hair was always done. He was shaved, it didn't look like he just rolled out of bed. Just little things about how to be a coach and how to present yourself and how to, how to work. I don't think the guy slept past 4 a.m., in his whole life. Like he's always the first guy in the building. And I actually tweeted that the other day. I was doing a morning workout before watching film, and I'm like, I couldn't stand. I was like 23, 24, still going out, being a young guy. And I'm like, why is this guy up just so early all the time? Like I couldn't stand it. And now I can't imagine not not getting up, getting a workout and kind of getting the day started. And I learned that from him. Then I went to Montini, Coach Bukowski and Coach Andriano. That was kind of the big decision. I was at my alma mater and I wanted to see what else was out there, and I left and went to the Catholic school down the street, and people were kind of ticked at me. And, Coach A, 300 wins as a head football coach. And, Coach Bukowski was the defensive coordinator, and with Coach Boo, it's just an unrelenting, I've never seen a guy with a drive like him, and him and Coach Boo or Coach A were kind of yin and yang. Coach A was, and I don't mean to say Coach A didn't work hard, but Coach A was more kind of the guy that, accepted everybody, and he was very just welcoming, and Coach Boo was just kind of, focused and driven and didn't really deal with the peripheral things because he was helping build this program. And Coach A was the guy with the cigar in his mouth, smiling, putting his arm around you. And, I could go on for hours what I learned from those guys, but I learned enough that I wanted to come back and continue to learn from Coach Boo, and Coach A is still around now that he's retired. I then went to Lamont High School. Brett Coy kind of taught me that you can be a Hall of Fame head coach and be a successful head coach, and you don't have to yell and scream as much as some coaches. Coach Coy, I remember one practice, he just came over and looked at me and goes, Johnny, you just tone it down a little bit. Like, the kid was in the wrong coverage. You can just go tell him, hey, he was in the wrong coverage. And, I was a young guy and very, passionate. And so it was just a learning a different way to kind of do things and just seeing that. And again, as I talked about before, the guys that I had worked with previously, like I said, Coach Kennedy, pure power, man, just an absolute animal of a coach. And then there's Coach Coy, who's literally the other side of the coin that, not a yeller, not a screamer, then I went to Nazareth, kind of that yin and yang thing too. Tim Rackey is one, he was at Driscoll forever. Now he's at Nazareth and has won everywhere he's been. Coach Rackey was another guy, just pure passion, incredible ability to relate with players. And the defensive coordinator who I worked for there was a guy by the name of Jeff Tumpain. I think I heard him yell one time the entire year. We would be playing Joliet Catholic. They'd rip off a big run and he'd be in the booth and just kind of, okay, tackle got washed, big lane there. All right, next play. Not getting overly emotional and that kind of thing. But kind of that yin and yang as Montini was, and the two schools, it's funny, they compete so much. Before, when it was Driscoll and Montini, they were real close to each other, competing constantly. Now it's Nazareth. We play them week 3 this year. So Coach Rackey, Coach Tumpain, if you're listening, take it easy on us. Remember, I was one of your favorite assistants. But then I went to Bolingbrook High School. John Ivlo has had, I think, almost 100 Division I kids, Power 5. And Coach Ivlo to me was, I learned to be the devil's advocate. I brought in a scheme that we ran at Nazareth for a punt. I said, hey, this worked over there. And he was a very big, like, hey, does this work for us? And, he would always kind of question, if I had a new scheme or a new this or new that, but, he would just be that devil's advocate. Well, what if we did it like this? Or what if they do this? Or what if they, and just made you think football, not kind of that, hey, I saw this at a clinic, let's do it this way. Well, okay, but what if they do this or whatever, so he was kind of just made me think a lot, and not that the other coaches didn't, but he was just the guy that always kind of had a question for me, and was very big on, can we run it here? It's great that you saw that at a clinic, or another coach that runs that, but can that work for us here at Bolingbrook? And then my first coordinator job, and like I said, sorry, there's a lot of coaches. Dan O'Donnell was a guy I played with at Carthage. He was the offensive coordinator at Morton while I was the defensive coordinator. But Dan was also a defensive coordinator before I got hired. So we had just great kind of conversations, and sometimes arguments, and sometimes just good banter on back and forth with coordinators. And using that guy from the other side of the ball was great for me. And I learned a ton from him and asked a ton of questions. And then Bob Organ was a guy, he played at Michigan State, had a cup of coffee in the NFL. Bob kind of showed me, if I want to be a head coach, how to let your assistants coach. Bob would certainly pipe in if he didn't agree with something defensively, or offensively, but he let Danny and I coach and just kind of run with things. And again, he was the head coach, so if he didn't like something, we'd be on the headsets. Hey, Johnny, I don't want this coverage anymore, or get out of this front, or whatever it was. But he let us really just kind of take over, and Danny was the coach of the offense. I was coach of the defense. So Bob really showed me how to delegate, and if I do become a head coach, I think delegating and trusting the people that you hire is very important. So a lot of guys in there. Obviously, I'm back at Montini working for Coach Boo. I had a moment where I was at Morton, and I was jumping a young assistant. We kind of got into it, and I thought, I stopped, and I had this moment where I was like, holy cow, this is how Coach Boo used to jump me when I was the young assistant. I'm like, I've become Coach Boo. Oh my goodness. You know what I mean? Like, you say something that's kind of like your dad used to say, or but I had that moment, and not long after, Coach Boo called me and inquired about me becoming the defensive coordinator. And I was like, yeah, I would love to be under your tutelage again, and go back to Montini. But my advice, obviously, after naming, I think I got 11 coaches that I just talked about, is just listen and take everything in, because each coach that you're going to work for is going to grow your coaching kind of repertoire in different ways. And if you can take something from each guy, or gal, you're going to be a great head coach. And it could be stuff that you don't want to do. I've certainly seen coaches where I'm like, no, can't do that. Never going to do that. Not necessarily that I've worked for, but maybe on another sideline or at a clinic or whatever, but just listen. I was very guilty early on, as I had a lot of success of thinking that I was, maybe that I knew more than I did. But one of the things that I'm glad I did, it was, just really listening to each guy and taking it in and taking in the best parts of each guy. So again, there was a lot of coaches there, a very long answer. But I learned something from every single guy I was with. And now I'm back with Coach Boo, and we're working together again, and it's been fantastic.
No, I think that was awesome, Coach, because it kind of just pointed out, like, I think a lot of times you get, oh, well, we have to do it this way, and we have to do it this way, and we, like there's so many ways, right? Different ways to skin a cat, I guess, to
Sure.
eat
Yeah.
great, and a lot of times you get so focused on like your vision and what you want that you're like, you get maybe rigid with that. All right, we're gonna go halftime adjustments. We're gonna get a little football here, a little
Okay.
X's and O's, and talk about game prep. Basketball. There's only so many ways you can play man. You maybe play a zone, and there's
Sure.
different things. But like in football, right? You could see one week you could see one style, and then the next week see a drastically different style. Like I
Right.
think about when I was in high school, I played down south. Teams typically ran the ball, right? Like it was run, pretty traditional type stuff. And then, Proviso East, they had D Brown,
Yeah.
basketball player, right? And a really good running back, and they kind of spread it out. And it was just a drastically different style. So I remember preparing for that was completely different than, so when you're kind of going through the season and like, you're obviously you don't want to look ahead, but looking at your schedule, how do you guys kind of incorporate some of that stuff and get ready for those different styles within your system? Because one week you could be a spread guy, and then there's maybe guys that run the wing T still, right? Or whatever it may be, which is completely different. You're going to move guys up that maybe aren't in the box, right? Or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Like me, I was a corner. I didn't want to get up there and stick my nose in there. I was just going to chase guys around. I was a skinny little guy. I'm like, hey, coach, can I just go chase this guy? But how do you guys go about that throughout the year of, kind of not looking ahead, but still trying to, get those skills and those techniques for things you're going to see?
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, coaching at Morton last year, we saw Proviso East, and I literally told their quarterback, I'm like, I hope you transfer, man. I'm like, I never want to see you again. They were empty, and they just ran around. I mean, he just ran around. It was the most exhausting. We won the game, and I felt like I was just in a fist fight for 4 hours, just hoping this kid didn't bust a big one. And then we played Downer South last week of the season, and I think they ran the ball 40 times against us. They had a big tight end that I think is at Army, and they got behind him and they just pounded the rock. And it's exactly what you were talking about, and so for me, I think it kind of goes back to that having having a lot of ways to do things. And I think that's why I run the defense that I do, because it can be multiple. You can bring a couple guys up to the line of scrimmage against the Downer South, and you can drop more guys back in coverage against a Proviso, or guys on our schedule. Nazareth's got an incredible quarterback. Providence is a team that traditionally has been big and strong, and so just trying to figure out. I think a big thing, and I took this. This is I'm sure he's not the first guy to say it, but a big thing from Bill Belichick that I took from him is, really taking stock of your kids and what they can do for you, and, being really honest with the kids. So, you're playing the Downer South, and you got a big defensive tackle that might be a backup, and might not have a big role in certain weeks, but you say, hey man, this is your week, this is your time to shine. We need more beef on the line of scrimmage. We're going to take out a skinny guy and put your big rear end in there, and I need you to stop the run. And then, the following week, he might not have as big of a role, because he's not a pass rusher. You're playing a spread team that likes to throw it around. Now you take another DB who, again, might not be one of your starting DBs, might not be one of your number one guys, and say, hey, you're going to have a big role this week. And I think looking at what a player can do instead of what he can't do, is something that's definitely going to help you, and just kind of get you ready each week for whatever team. I'm thinking of two kids right now on our team. The one kid is, he's 6'4", 300 plus. He is a massive human being. And so, when we play a team that wants to throw it around and he's not going to have a huge role, but if we play a team that's going to want to pound the rock, hey, you know what, this is your week, buddy. And I think that also with your kids, that keeps them, engaged. When you're going through a game plan or you're doing stuff like that, hey, is this my week? Is this the week that I get the big call? And I need to be ready, because if I'm not ready and this is my week of opportunity where, coach is finally going to say, hey, Johnny, you're in, we need you this week, and I'm not prepared, I'm blowing my only opportunity, and so maybe it's a junior or a sophomore that doesn't necessarily have a starting role, but has a certain, skill set that you can use. I think that keeps him engaged instead of, well, I don't play, I'm never going to play, this is stupid, and just keeping them around. And I think keeping that as part of your practice week to week too. Hey, we're going to have a 7-on-7 session where we, where we put in some extra DBs and just, hey, 10 minutes, but I just want to make sure that we're continuing to rehearse this so that when we do get to that team that throws it around like crazy, we're ready to go. And again, that kid is staying engaged. And then, hey, we're going to have a goal line session, short yardage, where we're really just going to pound the rock. And I'm going to tell our offensive coordinator, hey, man, go double tight, go, fullback. I don't even know if the offenses use those anymore. It's an H-back now. It's very fancy, I guess. They moved them up 2 steps. I don't know. Offensive guys are confusing. Everything's very just like, I don't know, fancy, and I don't know. That's why I coach defense. But, I think, hey, we're going to have that goal line package, and hey, now this big mamma jamma, I need you this is your period for 10 minutes. You got to give me everything you got, during the 7-on-7, you didn't have much to do, buddy, but hey, this is your time to shine. And everybody loves it, that a boy. So, that's for him, that big guy, that goal line session. Hey, you shut that middle of the defense down, man. I appreciate you. Good job. So that, he knows that he still has a role. And, and if it's basketball, hey, you're not, I love basketball. I thought I was Shaq, in 7th grade, I was 6'1", and thought I was going to be, the post player of all post players. And then everyone kept growing except me. But I was a hustler and a defensive guy and a rebounder. And, coach would bring me over. Hey, this kid's killing us. I need you to go be a Nat and just drive him crazy until the end of the half, until we can get out of this half and adjust. And so that was my role. I'm not going to score 20 points a game. I'm not going to score 2 points a game. Shooting was not my, not even close, but, I could go out there and hustle and give effort and shut down a kid that might be hurting us, offensively. So that was my role. And that's kind of how I learned that. And, I think that kind of allows you to, one, keep everybody involved, but also be able to change who you are week to week. Because again, you're going to play that Proviso East, and then next week you're going to play that Downer South, and it's 2 completely different football games. And the Downer South game, I think, was done in 20 minutes. They ran the ball 40 times right at our face and got behind that big tight end, who I'm very glad graduated and is moving on. And then the Proviso East game, I feel like, took 4 hours, because that kid, if you put the Looney Tunes soundtrack behind him running around. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I mean, he was just, but such a just dynamic, dangerous player. I was like, dude, I never want to see you again as long as I live. I had 4 strokes over there on the sideline watching you run around. But, you know, we played more DBs that week. And then the Downers South week, we played more alignment, you know. So everybody kind of has their role and everybody's involved. And I think that allows you to, one, keep everybody engaged because it's not always going to be your week. But then also prepare each week for that different style of offense and be ready for whatever's on your schedule.
So I kind of want to kind of combine 2 questions here because I think they fit well together. And the first, I kind of want to talk about, you know, that process of watching film. You know, Todd, you, myself, we all watch film. You know, and you're looking for strengths of the opponent, maybe weaknesses you can exploit. But then I want to combine that into how do you communicate that to the team then, right? Because you have all these ideas in your head, you have all these things you want to do, but how do you, as you kind of talked about already, kind of simplify and make sure it's enough information, but not too much?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to say I don't watch a lot of film, but I mean I do. Don't get me wrong, but I'm very ADD. I can't sit and watch. I mean, some of these old school guys can sit in a dark room for 6 hours and watch every cut up of every film of everything, and I lose my mind, you know. So especially with football, I want to know what you've done recently, you know, because your team week 1 is not your team week 9. You know, you got a kid that, you know, hurts an ankle or you know, is ineligible or whatever. Your team is constantly changing as an organism. So I would say my film preparation, I'm going to watch as many games as we have, but I want to watch those last 2 weeks. Who are you as a team? You know, the other thing is let's watch a scheme that's similar to ours. You know, when I was at Morton, I run, you know, I basically, through Jeremy Cordell at Glenbard South, I adapted the 3-3 stack to kind of who we were, but we took it from Chad Hetlett, Jeremy and Chad put it together, their version of it at Glenbard West. So we get film where our opponent is playing Glenbard West. Well, okay, that team runs the same defense as we do for the most part. You know, I put my little spins on it, whatever. But at the bare bones, that's our defense. So let's watch that game. How did, you know, Downer South, I don't know if they played them last year, but just hypothetically, how did Downer South attack the 3-3 stack? You know, then we get a film where, you know, another opponent runs a 4-front. Well, we don't run a 4-front. So I'll watch that game. I want to know, you know, if there's any trick plays or what they do on 3rd and long and all that stuff. But that game is not going to get as much focus from me as a Glenbard West because I literally have their playbook. I know what they're running, how they're attacking things. I studied their, you know, their defense and adapted it and made it my own. But let's find a team that runs a similar scheme as we do, you know, and let's focus in on how that team is attacking, you know, our similar scheme. But, you know, I want to know who you are the last 2 weeks, you know, because again, football is just it's the organism just changes every, you know, again, week 1 to week 9 to week 10. If you make the playoffs, 11, you're not going to be the same team. Maybe you found something that worked. Maybe one of those kids that you didn't think was a starting linebacker is now a big blocking H-back for you, or for an opponent. And it's like, okay, week 1, I didn't even see that kid on the field one time. Week 9, this kid's, you know, plowing people over and knocking bodies out because a coach saw him do a blocking drill and now he's got a different role. So I'll certainly watch all of those. You know, if we have 4 games, I'm going to watch all 4, but I want to know, you know, how they attack the team with a similar scheme as us. And I want to know who you are the last 2 weeks leading into our game, you know. And then I took a game plan. I do some work with Throw Deep Publishing. And there was a guy, Jacob Gill, who I watched one of his presentations and wrote a quick little summary on it. He had a Google Slides, excuse me, that he would use for all of his kids, and he would send it out. And I was like, holy cow, that's the 2020, 2021, whatever, way to do that. And, Coach Kirby at Throw Deep Publishing was awesome and let me write these articles, but I was also stealing stuff as I was writing these little summaries for him. So I saw Coach Gill's scouting report that he would send out to the kids, and everything's on your phone now. So sending it out to the kids and getting that information to them, I tell a kid, I'm like, listen, if you're binge watching a show, whatever, Stranger Things, and, if it's a half-hour episode, every 15 minutes, pause the show, 10 minutes in your phone, going over the game plan, then put your show back on 10 more minutes after the show. And you start it up again. If it's an hour-long show, every 20 minutes, hit pause, give yourself 10 minutes in the game plan, get off Instagram, get off Twitter, and take 10 minutes and just keep going over that game plan, because now it's in your phone, it's in your pocket and you can watch it. A lot of schools have iPads for kids. You can watch it on your iPad. You're done with your homework in study hall, get into, instead of chasing the girl that probably doesn't want to talk to you anyway, get into the game plan, learn it, study it. There's no excuses now. It's not, a packet of paper and, hey, I lost my game plan. I don't know sorry, coach, I didn't get a chance. No. It's in your phone. It's online. You can look at it anytime you want. So I stole that right from Coach Gill. I think I reached out to him about 15 times. He's like, who is this lunatic? Because I'm like, this is the way, like, this is the new way of getting that scouting report to our kids. And then I think being, I recently got out of teaching. I'm a liquor rep now. But I was a special ed teacher when I was teaching. And I think being a special ed teacher, you have to find a way to simplify things and get your student from A to B. And I think that was very valuable for me in coaching. If you have that, like I said, that junior that we were talking about, that might be a defensive back, hey, all I need you to do is cover this kid. That's it. I don't need you to know the plays. I don't need you to, if this kid goes and gets a hot dog, you get a Coke for him, and there's 100 different ways to say that, but I don't want to be inappropriate on the podcast here. But like, hey, this is your job. That's it. I don't care. I could call blue, green, orange, red, twist, this, that. Don't listen. You're covering that kid. That is your role this week. And so and that's a very simplified example, but, making it as simple as you can for the kids. And when we were at Morton, we had a B gap blitz that we called Berwyn, because our field was in Berwyn. Berwyn starts with B, and it's a B gap blitz, and it was for the inside linebackers. So I said, guys, Berwyn is inside of our district. That's an inside linebacker blitz. B gap, like, I cannot simplify this anymore. And I think that's kind of like, I laugh. I'm like, that's like the most creative thing I've done in coaching. Like, inside linebacker blitzes were Berwyn and Cicero, because Berwyn and Cicero were in our district. Outside linebacker blitzes were Chicago, because Chicago's outside of our district. I was like, holy cow, I've cracked the code. I love bragging about that. That's my little pat on the back. But, just again, finding that way to simplify it, and you can call it whatever you want, or you can scheme it up however you want. But if the kids don't understand it, it's not going to be any good. So making it simple for the kids and finding the best way to get that information to the kids. Like I said, Coach Gill, he was at Shiloh Christian. I believe he's the head coach at a different school now. I don't remember which school, but I bugged the snot out of him to get that copy of the Google slides presentation, because now it's again, it's streamlined. It's on their phones. There's no excuse to not know it. So kind of going all the way back, finding schemes that are like ours. How did that opponent attack it? Getting it out to the kids in the digital age, and then, making it simple when you're putting in a new play or a new blitz or whatever, so that the kids can remember it. Because again, you can call it, like, I love watching these NFL shows, and these plays are 700 words long, and I'm like, why can't you just call it Berwyn? Like, or like, why does it have to be 700 words when one word could probably do the trick? So yeah, that's how I, like I said, communicate it to the kids and get what we need from, the film.
So I kind of want to follow up on that before I get to the next question. I like that borough in Chicago. So, I think that's something I've thought about, and I've talked to John about it, like trying to organize your plays and like families or basketball be a series to
Yeah,
where it's essentially the same play, but it's different based on what you call it. So how do you, when you're like putting together your playbook, kind of how do you go about organizing that stuff? Obviously, you have your formations and
sure.
and all that, but I've always thought, like kind of learning from football, like
Mhm.
some of the coaches just simplify it, like you said, and then other ones, basketball happens too, where it's like horn, or, you could go on
Yeah,
Twitter.
yeah.
John jokes all the time. It's, horns, flip around, jump upside down, twist, like, so how do you kind of, when you starting out the year, how do you kind of organize all that and put it, make it concise for yourself?
Well, I think you start at, the bottom basement. What's the simplest thing that we're going to do? What's the thing we're going to run the most? And then you kind of just, once you're good at that, you expand from there. Um, you know, and then I think you just keep adding wrinkles, and I think you're able to, um, hey, this is our black coverage, but with a twist. So now we call it red. So you can explain it to a kid that's already learned something when you're putting something new in, and say, hey, this is just the same thing as the thing that you've learned in July, in August, but now we're just tinkering it a little bit and calling it a different name. So they have that understanding of that base of what you're doing, and then you kind of expand from there. And I mean, people, one of the things that drives me nuts in football is there's just 1,000 names for the same stuff, like I'm going to call it the double eagle express technique. And you're like, I don't know what that means. Like what, every coach has got their own language, and every coach wants to call it something different and make it so they thought of it, and all this stuff. And, sometimes you go to clinics and I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And then you ask him a question. He's like, I'm just a 4-4. And you're like, oh, why don't you just say that? So, sometimes I think it's not overcomplicating things, because these are high school kids, whether it's, varsity football or varsity girls basketball. They got other things going on. They're fighting with their girlfriend, dad's making them cut the lawn, whatever. Like, just making it as simple as possible, but just kind of building from that initial base. And then you can kind of, like I said, say, hey, this is just our black coverage, but with a little twist. So we're calling it red. So they know black coverage, right? We've done it 1,000 times all summer. And then we're just, hey, we're putting a little twist on it for, Proviso East. So we're going to call it red. Or, I came out, like I said, with Throw Deep Publishing, I came out with a thing on the 3-3 stack. And then I realized, okay, dummy, you're putting all your stuff out there. Now you got to find new names for everything, because, we play, like I said, Naz, Providence, Brother Rice. All they got to do is click on one of your videos and they got your old, they got all your calls. So it's like, now you got to figure out a new way to call everything. And, but just again, similar families, like when we were at Morton, all the 2 linebacker blitzes were towns, and you can do that any way you want. You can make it animals, you can make it, whatever. I was talking to our sophomore defensive coordinator, and he said when he was coaching his son's youth team, one of the coaches was doing all these fancy names and stuff. And he goes, why don't you just call them superheroes? He goes, these kids are 10 years old. I'm pretty sure they're going to remember the superheroes. And he goes, once we started with the superheroes, we never missed a call again. Every kid knew what Batman was and Superman. And so calling it something that the kids will remember. And then kind of, again, building from that base of what are we going to do the most? What are we going to be in 93% of the time? And then all the other little wrinkles and all the other stuff are just built off of that.
I had a sophomore team once that wanted to call a sideline out of bounds pancake. So I get it.
If they're going to remember it,
yeah,
call it whatever you want.
I couldn't bring myself to. I think we called it something else. I couldn't be yelling out, "Hey, we're gonna run pancakes!" But
yeah, pancakes.
All right, so you talked about that communication of the game plan. Your coordinator had on here. and you're in the game, and you know something's going on. Maybe some guy's killing you, right? Or some plays killing you, and your head coach is like, you know, coming over to you, coach, we got to stop this. You know, how do you balance that, making adjustments versus staying the course? And then, you know, in that process, you know, how are you processing the feedback from your coaches up in the box, or your head coach, or whatever, to kind of, you know, decide, okay, hey, maybe we got to do something different here, or we just got to do what we're doing better.
I think that kind of figuring out why a big play happened. You know, let's say, for example, you know, down or south just ripped off a 20-yard run. Okay, why did that happen? If a kid fell down and just wasn't there to make a tackle, tripped and fell, all right, that's not a scheme thing. That's Johnny has 2 left feet and just face planted, and wasn't there to, you know, be the force player, or wasn't there to make a tackle. That's not a scheme thing. I don't need to adjust that, you know, because he just felt, you know, hey, we're all human. We all make mistakes, you know. Is it a personnel thing? You know, we had a kid when I was at Morton, was more of a kind of a hybrid linebacker, defensive back, but was more of a defensive back than he was a linebacker. So, you know, a team would find him and start running the ball at him, and okay, now we got to switch him to, you know, the other side, because they're attacking, you know, this kid because he's not as stout and not as physical. He's more of an athlete. That's a personnel thing. You know, let's move him to another spot, or let's find a kid to replace him, because this is how, you know, OPRF or down or south or whoever is going to attack us. That's a personnel thing. And then if it's a scheme thing, you know, like I said, my assistant coach, Cam James, just came up to me and, coach, we don't have to run this fancy, you know, fancy scheme you put in. It's confusing the kids. That guy's not that good, so we can just run our normal stuff. All right, Cam, cool. You know, and then I think, you know, figuring out if it is a scheme thing, and it is something where, you know, you got to get on the whiteboard, and try and figure something out, you know, just again, being creative, taking your time, and just figuring out how to get the problem stopped. So I think, you know, there's different things that go wrong in a game. Every game there's something that's going to happen, and one of the things I think I am good at, is kind of being calm in that moment and not overreacting, and just figuring out what happened. You know, hey, Johnny fell down. Okay, well, Johnny falls down sometimes. You know, it's not the end of the world. They got a big play. All right, this kid has got 4 or 5 tackles in the quarter. He's an animal. We love him. He just tripped and fell. All right, so hey, that's not on you. That's a physical mistake. We're good with that. We can move on. You're not going to fall down the next time. We're going to be fine. But if they are, you know, hey, they found the weak link, or they found a kid that might struggle at something, you know, okay, now do we have one? I mean, when you're coaching and you're coaching high school sports, it's not like, you know, college or the pros. Do we have a replacement for this kid? You know, like our bench might be a little limited. So it's not like we can just pull out another guy and just, hey, you know what, you're in now, this guy's out. So that might be, hey, they're picking on this kid. We might need to change up the scheme. We might need to change up the kid. And then again, if it is a scheme thing, you know, because there are some really good coaches out there, you know, what can we do to get this fixed, and how can we, you know, still stay within what we do, but still be successful, you know? So I think, to answer, you know, your question, like if it's just a physical thing, let's stay the course. The scheme is sound. It's a physical thing. You know, again, I keep using the falling down example, but, you know, that's not a scheme issue. Let's stay the course. The guy just got blocked, or the guy just fell down. You know, you say, hey, make sure you rip through, make sure you're on his outside shoulder, whatever it is. You just coach that kid up, and then he figures it out, and then you're good. But, you know, if it is a scheme thing, I think, again, listening to your assistants. My first year as a defensive coordinator, you know, I wanted to be Bill Belichick and Nick Saban and figure everything out. And you know, you learn real quick that, like, hey, there's too much going on, man. You got to listen to the guys you put around you, because they're also really good football coaches too. So, A big thing that I changed was my defensive line coach is like, dude, your defensive line calls are too complicated. He goes, can we just go Rip and Liz left and right? And I'm like, that makes a ton of sense. If I want them to go to the right, I just call Rip. And then I tell the kids, I'm like, if you got to do the L thing, Liz, that way, and we didn't have any more problems with it then. We were playing in a game. It was too complicated. The kids were going the wrong, we had kids running into each other, going the wrong way. And Dave came over and he goes, dude, can we just go Rip and Liz? I'm like, holy cow. Yeah, that would solve everything. So we went to Rip and Liz. It was very simple. We didn't have that issue anymore. So I think just diagnosing why you had a problem, whether it's personnel, scheme, whatever, and then going from there to get it fixed.
So as we kind of move into our last two segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout. It's your opportunity to kind of discuss whatever you want to talk about. It can be about yourself, your family, your program, something you want our listeners to know that has nothing to do with football. You could turn the tables and ask Todd and I a question, kind of the next 30 seconds. It's all you.
Yeah, I wanted to know, kind of what you guys have taken from football. I see it from a football perspective, but I mean, I love basketball. I'm coaching a youth girls team in the winter. Any tips that you guys can give to a football coach to, help me coach some 5th and 6th graders with my wife and get after it and win a parochial league title here.
I've actually taken a lot from football. I feel like, I don't know about you, Todd, but I just feel like it's the way in which football coaches organize practice, the continuous focus on fundamentals. In football, it's a lot of breakdown stuff, which I have definitely taken to, breaking things down smaller and smaller. And I think that's a trend I've seen in the basketball coaching profession in the last 7 to 10 years. Is definitely more like football, definitely more positional, those kind of things. So definitely the way you organize a practice and the way you prepare as a football coach, I definitely have taken as a basketball coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, we talked about it a little bit, but I've always been interested in the organization of the playbook, right? The family, the series, and trying to get that as concise as possible. I do like, I've always been interested too at, especially teams that play maybe more spread team and team that wants to go, in the practicing at pace, right? That's one of the big things. I know John plays fast, but you see football teams that run a fast paced spread, like everything they do in practice is go, go, go. So kind of getting that mindset, into your players, and it's a lot of organization too, of organizing things that flow, and you can do that. So those are kind of things I look at, at football. And then obviously, like John said, the breakdowns and stuff like that. But sure, I've looked at those kind of two things. And then, I think I said John won this summer of a end of the game inbounds play. You saw it this year in the NCAA tournament. FAU ran basically a 5 wide or 4 out formation to inbound the ball right out of
right.
bounds. Just things like that, doing something different that maybe people haven't seen.
Right.
But it gets the same thing done. So those are kind of things I've looked at. I coached football for a little bit back in the day. I love coaching it, and I think you just try to see things from a different perspective.
Right.
All right, Todd, take the wheels
All right.
off.
Well, this is where we get into the hard-hitting journalistic questions. Either that or the episode goes off the rails. One of the two. Just rapid fire, quick hitters, answer it any way you want. First question: is a hot dog a sandwich?
No, it's a hot dog.
I love it. There we go.
Okay.
No, it's a hot dog.
I live by some pretty big hot dog organizations here: Johnny's, Gene and Jude. So a lot of hot dog discussion going on around where I live. But I believe that it is a hot dog, and a sandwich is a sandwich. So
okay. Do you eat or drink soup?
I believe you eat soup. This was a raging debate when I was teaching at Bolingbrook. Is cereal a soup? I mean, the conversations around soup are never ending. And I mean, we had some students screaming at each other in class. But to answer your question, keep it quick hitting because I talk too much sometimes. I believe that you eat it.
Okay. What's a highlight for you in the last year? Could be anything you've done.
Well, we found out my wife was pregnant with our first baby.
Awesome.
So she is doing football season while pregnant. So huge shout out to my wife, Amanda. That was probably the highlight of the last year. And then also, I mean, just being hired as the defensive coordinator at Montini, Mike Bukowski's been the defensive coordinator almost as long as I've been alive. So for him to have the trust in me to turn it over and let me kind of run with it was a big deal to me. And part of the reason why, I took the job as the liquor rep so that I could have more freedom to kind of coach where I wanted. But I would say the biggest highlight is, that moment where, we find out she's pregnant and, we're excited and hugging and all that stuff. So like I said, huge shout out to my wife doing football season while pregnant. Love you, Amanda, if you're listening to this.
What's something you've always wanted to learn outside of coaching?
I would say speaking Italian. I'm Italian. I live in a giant Italian community. And I love when, some of these older guys that are around here just rattle off a quick sentence in Italian and, three guys go, oh, and I'm like, what did he just say? Like, well, I don't know what that means. So I think it would be cool to kind of learn, the language of my ancestors. I think would be pretty neat.
All right, last one here. What is something you daydream about? You're sitting around watching film, you kind of space out. What is something you daydream about?
Well, recently I've been daydreaming about being a father. It's like, I almost feel like, you still feel like you're a little kid, just like an older little kid. And then it's like, I'm going to be responsible for another human being. It's like, holy cow. So, when I'm watching film or driving or whatever, you think about, a human that I'm going to be responsible for and just kind of what life's going to look like, when we get to that point and, raising a family and starting a family with my wife and that kind of thing, is something that, has consumed a lot of my thoughts recently. So yeah, just, being a dad and, I've seen the clips of, Bill Belichick with his dad at practice and there's Remember the Titans where, the daughters, screaming at the team and whether we have a boy or a girl, just having her involved with whatever football program or whatever level I'm at is kind of, something that makes me smile and something, you daydream about when you're lost in thought is definitely something that's been on the mind recently.
When you have one, you can at least still play man to man, right? You can when you get more than one, now you got to start doing that zone coverage and
work on zone now. Yeah. Let's just get through one first.
Yeah, let's just get through one and play man to man, and we'll be all good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Coach, thank you again for joining us today. We had a lot of fun. We wish Montini football the best of luck this season, and if there's something we can do for you, please let us know.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me. And like I said, once football season's done, we're starting with, the Catholic League youth basketball. So I'll definitely be popping into some practices and getting some drills because, hey, we're trying to win. I don't care if it's youth girls basketball, we're going for the ship. So
Thanks.
My wife is about 20 times more competitive than I am. So she'll be at practice with us. She was a basketball player at Trinity and, so yeah, we're gonna be in touch for sure, guys.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in concert with the Illinois Basketball Coaches Association. Please remember to give us a 5-star rating wherever you may listen. For more show content and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout and subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.